Thank you for joining the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast with your host, Clayton Craddock.
Thank you for listening to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast. My name is Clayton Craddock. Today, my guest is Joe Choroszewski. As a sub on Broadway, Joe has played on 22 different productions, including shows like The Lion King, Book of Mormon, Wicked, Legally Blonde, and Young Frankenstein, just to name a few. Artists he's worked with over the years include Mario Cantone, Countess Luann from The Real Housewives of New York City, Heather Headley, Sutton Foster, Cheyenne Jackson, and Clay Aiken. Joe was also the drummer for Avenue Q for 9.5 years off-Broadway and played Promises, Promises, and Finding Neverland on Broadway. And now he's the drummer for the Radio City Christmas Spectacular. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Choroszewski. Welcome to Broadway Drumming 101. My name is Clayton Craddock, and my guest today is Joe Choroszewski. Thank you for being here. I'm so glad you can be a part of it.
I'm thrilled to be here. I've been wanting to do any kind of podcast, and I'm glad to start with a friend of mine. It's a good place to start.
I realize that you're from Long Island.
No, I'm from Queens. When I was a kid, I was born in Manhasset in Nassau County, but that was just my parents looked for a better hospital than they could. That's all. So, born in Manhasset.
What part of Queens did you grow up in? I
lived in Flushing till I was 5.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Like a very residential part of Flushing. Yeah, over by I guess Francis Lewis, Utopia, over there by the cemetery. So. Did you go to
where'd you go to elementary school?
Well, that's when we moved. My father's work was shifting to decidedly more of a New Jersey-based kind of thing. So that summer I turned 5 was when we moved. So like a month after I turned 5, that August, we moved to Central Jersey. And that's when we moved to Branchburg, temporarily to Branchburg, New Jersey, near where I still live, Somerset County, northern central New Jersey.
Was it at that point where you saw a drum set and you're like, you know what, this is what I want to do for a living?
No, that actually had hit, if you can believe this, that hit me much earlier. It's one of those possibly instinctive things that possibly wired in the DNA thing. No one showed me the drums. No one encouraged, said, oh, you should try this. As my mother's father, my late grandfather, he passed away when I was 10 months old. So I never actually knew him as a conscious young person or adult, and he was a club day drummer. That was his passion. He ended up having to go right into a day job because he had a family early in his 20s. But so he worked for the phone company. But he was a true weekend warrior of like New York and the Queens area in particularly the 60s and the 70s. And so that drum thing was somehow in me, in my family DNA somehow. So as a young toddler, I was doing the typical pots and pans things, and I would set up whatever toys I had in an arrangement that resembled a drum set. It was just something I just started doing, and it wasn't shown to me or encouraged by an outside influence. So,
did your parents go out and buy you a real drum set shortly afterwards?
Not shortly. The progression of instruments was, I guess, a common one for a young kid. When I was young, it was like the toy drum set thing. Like when I was probably 3 or 4, I had like the Smurf drum set with paper heads. back in Toys R Us, there used to be a wall of paper head drum sets. That's gone now. But and then progressed to a better toy instrument when I was 6. And then finally, when I was 9, about to turn 10, that's when we obtained some real professional drums. My mother's brother, my late Uncle Bob, he was not a professional drummer, just like an enthused hobby drummer. And so he sold me his then Slingerland kit because he assumed he took over using my late grandfather's drums. So at that point in time, he kind of passed on his Slingerland kit right when I turned 10. So I guess I had real instruments from age 10 on.
Were you taking drum lessons at that point or before?
Yes. My parent, when we moved to my parents' current house, which is in Hillsborough, New Jersey, when I started third grade, that fall of third grade is right when my mom enrolled me in local music store lessons in Somerville, New Jersey. So I was just it was like a small music studio, loud practice pad, in the 80s, the Rima practice pad. And it was basically practice pad lessons for 2 years before.
Did you learn starting out traditional grip or match grip?
Match grip. Traditional grip made an appearance in high school. And then I adapted that into my bag of tricks also.
Now,
but it was.
What made you decide to adapt that style?
The traditional grip thing came about because of my high school's marching band program. The high school that I went to had a very serious, very competitive marching program. It was fashioned after the DCI drum corps model of performance that was happening around, and we would have instructors who were from that world. So it just became decided that our snare players would uniformly play traditional grip. And I think I may have even started checking it out before I actually decided to play snare in marching band. So it evolved in high school. And then my later private teacher also covered that with me. So
did you play snare drum in the marching band?
For a little while. I was more enthused by it has a lot of names. Some people call it tenors, some people call it multi-toms, some people call it quads. That was more I think because it resembled a drum set more to me. So it was, and I was very excited. The one year we got quints where there was a 6-inch drum in the middle, a little high pitch.
I remember when I was younger, I tried to hold up. They used to call them tri-toms, but they were like huge.
Yeah,
drums.
the predecessor to quads was in like the 70s. Was like tri-toms, 3. Yeah, exactly.
And my back and my core wasn't very strong, but to hold those things up, man, it was just like, how do you guys do that?
When I was 14, I was a skinny, scrawny kid, and here I was holding the heaviest instrument. And I mean, I'm glad it didn't have any long-term problem, any effects on my back. But I remember being like a small-framed 14-year-old holding a very heavy harness piece of equipment and for many hours because of how serious our program was. There was lengthy rehearsals. So,
did you have a lot of competitions back then? And did you win?
That was the traditional season where we did the whole band camp in August. You spend like a brutal week outside learning your show, which was the only performance program you did the whole season, and you used football games as a chance to perform that show every single week. So I'm sure the high school football fans kind of got sick of seeing the marching band play the same artsy show every week on the field. So football games would typically be Fridays, and then competitions would be Saturdays and Sundays, sometimes 2 a weekend, all around New Jersey.
Were you playing in like rock bands, jazz bands during,
Yeah, well, I was in, as far as school goes, I was in every facet of the band program, and I was most passionate about jazz band. Jazz band was my driving force in the band program. That was what I most connected to in terms of interest and just emotional connection to the music and that particular art of playing music where drum set driving with a band. So that, I connected most jazz, but I was involved with every aspect of wind ensemble and concert band. As far as rock bands go, not as much. I played around with some friends in a rock band, maybe probably when I was a sophomore, and nobody was very good. It didn't. We never even played a gig. It was just the thing we kind of rehearsed and messed around with. But that's not anything I would ever credit as being a significant part of my high school musical development. So. Yeah, I was much more academically oriented. I was very focused on the school programs, and then beyond that, programs outside of my school and the New Jersey All-State programs. So.
who were you listening to when you were in junior high and high school as far as drummers are concerned? Like, who were some of your influences back then?
Excuse me. I would say being influenced by specific drummers came along in my high school years. Probably in junior high, middle school, it was more about just whatever music I enjoyed. I think my brain was not yet in a place to focus on isolating a drummer's role and a drummer's impact. As far as music, I was kind of, maybe an odd kid in that respect, that I was oftentimes like an older soul. I adapted so much to music that my father would show me and I would hear on classic radio. So I actually missed out on a lot of, I was just different, that I wasn't as into the most current things. I was in middle school, 91 to 94. And that's of course the grunge alternative years. That's when it hit. So everybody I knew was all about all those bands. And I was familiar with them. It just wasn't what I was seeking out. So
somebody said, "Man, have you heard this new Nevermind album?" You're like, "No."
No, I think that's the thing is I definitely heard it because it played at like every kid's house at a party. So I heard, it just wasn't like, I wasn't seeking it out on my own. I heard it, I guess like atmospherically.
Yeah, it was
everywhere. Yeah, exactly. So, but I was an older soul. So and even in elementary school, thanks to my late Uncle Bob, I was a big Beatles fan. I was way into the Beatles from the age like 8 on. And then if you can believe this, like when I was 9, I got heavy into Elton John. He's still my favorite artist of all time. I'm a huge Elton fan. So that started when I was like 9 years old. So,
all right, question: what's your favorite album by Elton John?
Oh, that's a heavy hitter. I don't think I have one. There's so many.
Okay, if you remember, I don't know if you remember
one per era.
Okay, the mid 70s.
Sure.
If you remember, I don't know if you remember the Desert Island disc. I can't remember if it was a magazine, but like if you were on a desert island, you can only take 5 CDs with you.
Yeah, back in the 90s, everyone asked that. That would be on even like it's like chain emails, like, oh yeah, answer this. What are your 5 desert island discs?
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you had to take one Elton
John disc in my 5, I think I actually would take, because it's of an important time period to me. I think I would actually take one of his late 80s albums. I might actually take Sleeping with the Past from 1989. Of all people, Jonathan Moffat on drums.
What?
Sugarfoot.
Really?
Yeah. And I saw him on tour. I saw him, Sugarfoot, Jonathan Moffat.
Wow.
In the 1989 tour. I was in the then Brendan Byrne Arena, later called the Continental Airlines Arena, Izod Arena in the Meadowlands. And my parents got seats behind the stage, like really like bad seats. Like they're actually behind, but like behind the stage, you can see the whole rack. And I didn't even know who he was when I was 9, but I later figured out, oh, that's who I saw. I was watching Jonathan Moffat do his crash behind his head.
Yes. Yeah. I wonder if I guess he probably did that before, what's his name? The drummer that played for Prince, John Blackwell.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. He was much older. Yeah.
I should go back and check out that album.
That's the. I mean, he doesn't do it. It's just it's appropriate drumming, but it's colorful in the way that Jonathan Moffat did. But yes, that's going back to saying that's the music I was originally listening to that wasn't necessarily of the moment geared towards young people. When I was in high school, I started getting a lot more into drummers, and that's when the jazz thing happened, and I became aware of big band and fusion, and so people finally showed me Dave Weckl, and that all happened in high school. So that was more of a teenage years.
When you finished up high school, did you say, I want to pursue a career in music? And
yes.
Why? And what made you say, music instead of something else? Were you interested in anything else other than like pursuing a career in music?
Not enough. No, I believe I would say I was laser focused on a life in music. Nothing else was of interest enough. I mean, I didn't have a backup plan. I guess when you're 17, you don't think of a backup plan. You just kind of go for the thing that you're trying to do and that you're most interested in. But I think it was because I was doing very well musically on the high school level, and that I was making it into the top of All-State in New Jersey. And so I was gauging my ability to place amongst music in terms of auditioning and being able to function within a high performing ensemble, such as like the New Jersey All-State Wind Ensemble. And so I fit in that level. So that's what gave me a clue that like, I'm not fooling myself. I had a chance at making a serious run for it. So by the time I was a junior, senior, I was specifically preparing to do a performance audition for music school and picking the schools that I was going to go for. So,
did you have an idea of what kind of career you wanted to have after graduating college?
Yes, and this sounds crazy, but the Broadway bug had bitten me very early, and I was aware of that. I was aware of that career, and I wanted it since I was a young teenager. So I even though I went to school as a jazz studies major, I don't think my intent was ever to perform jazz as a career. I don't know who fools himself into thinking they're going to play jazz full time as a career. That's kind of a problem with the university structure. Like, yeah, we're going to take all this money to train you in jazz and nothing else. That's a whole other can of worms of a topic of the university, the academic approach to career readiness. But yeah, so even though I was majoring in jazz, I was, even before college, aiming for hopefully a life on Broadway or show drumming, let's call it.
Okay, so what was it that made you interested in show drumming?
A very specific thing. I think I was aware of show music, musical theater, loosely in my young years, but I don't think I fully understood what it was. Like my parents actually never took me to a Broadway show. Shame on them. No, they're going to listen to this. But my mom was familiar with. My mom had seen some shows growing up in New York, and I think I had heard her listening to like the chorus line cast recording, but I didn't fully understand what that was. But what really got me into it was when I was in 7th grade. I was in the Central Jersey Region 2 Orchestra. So they placed me with the orchestra when I made Regions, and that orchestra in the repertoire for that program was a medley of music from Miss Saigon. It was a Miss Saigon medley, and within the small percussion section, I actually auditioned within the section for the chance to play the drum set part to this medley. So they actually held like a little quick runoff audition to see who could play the drum set part to this medley, and I won out that small audition, and that got me electrified. So I loved the idea of playing the drum set part with an orchestra. So, and I love that. I was like, what is this music? What is Miss Saigon? And then that it kind of snowballed from there. That led to seeking out what is that show. That led to obtaining the cast recording and becoming obsessed with it. And that led to seeking out other cast, like, okay, what are some other shows? The shows that have cool, because Miss Saigon was quite a intriguing piece for someone who's a drummer and a percussionist. It was like probably some of the most eclectic sounds you're ever going to hear, at least in that time period, in the early 90s, mid 90s, of percussion and drum sounds in a Broadway show. So I found it electrifying. So,
question: did you ever get a chance to play it on Broadway?
No, I was a little young for that moment in time. Miss Saigon closed on Broadway when I was a junior in college, so I was not.
It came back though.
Yeah, it was a different thing. It was that 1 year thing. Ray Marchica, I was amazed. He was so cool. He got to do it because they combined the books even further. So he was doing a very. I hats off to him, and everyone having to sub for him. That would have been difficult for me to prepare because of all the sounds that weren't just drums. So no, that the moment had passed, the original run. But what I did get to do, I had an opportunity that I kind of sought out when I was a sophomore in high school. When I was 15, I found my way into watching in the pits. I found my way into sitting with Howie Joins and watching him play a performance of Miss Saigon in the pit when I was 15, and that was like head exploding, life changing. That was really probably one of the ultimate life-changing days that I can recall in the first half of my life.
You wound up doing what you wanted to do, but you went to college to study jazz at North Texas State?
That's the former name. Yeah, but by the late 80s, it was called the University of North Texas State. But yeah, people from a certain generation all refer to it as North. It's commonly called North Texas State to make people remember when it was a
University of North Texas.
That's the current name.
Now, where exactly is that? Because I know somebody else went there too.
Yeah, it is in the city of Denton or Denton. I don't know how the correct local pronunciation is, Denton, which is sort of at the top of what they call the Golden Triangle in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. Mm-hmm. So like Interstate 35 comes down from Oklahoma and it splits right in Denton. So 35 East goes to Dallas, 35 West goes to Fort Worth, and those cities are neighboring side-by-side cities.
Okay.
And Denton's kind of on top of that, like 45 minutes to the north.
All right. Why did you choose University of North Texas as opposed to Berkeley? Or
Berkeley was ruled right out because of the money. That just because of my parents and the financial situation that was where we were at. Berkeley was not an option. University of North Texas is a big state university in Texas, so it was, I'd say, more affordably priced. But that was on my radar specifically because of my band director in high school, Mindy Shireman, excellent band director, really passionate, more concerned for students, more invested in students than you'd ever imagine a band director could be, like a really passionate person. And she put University of North Texas on my radar because she was very in touch with the academic world, and she knew which schools had the best programs for certain types of music. And the 1 o'clock lab band is the best known big band from the school, and they sometimes go around touring, performing at schools. And there was I think our school was once going to maybe take a bus trip to see them perform. It didn't work out, but so that school was on my radar as being like, if not the top competitive, rigorous programs for jazz and drum set instruction. So I looked at a few other schools, but that was sort of like the main focus of I should probably go there if I really want to elevate to a competitive professional level.
Do you still keep in contact with some of your contemporaries that went to school with you there?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there are some important connections that I'll get to. But yeah, friends that I was in that class with, I talked to constantly. Yeah, that was.
So you were a jazz performance major?
Correct, yeah.
And you said you had some issues with being, I guess, focusing on jazz performance as a discipline, or is it something that you had a problem with from studying it, or you just saw that it wasn't something that you thought?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a problem or an issue. It was more just like seeing where I fit in versus, and what's cool is that the school is gigantic. It's a huge program. So it's not like a conservatory or like a small jazz where it might be like you and Owen, the other jazz drummer. It's a giant program. So there's even there's a whole structure of competing for opportunities that are scarce within the program itself. But the cool thing about being a huge program is you meet a lot of different people, and not everybody's the same. Not everyone's cut out. And so I met some really cool guys. People I'm still in touch with, at least on social media, who do a variety of gigs that have nothing to do with jazz, which is very cool. Shout out to my friend Matt Thompson, who's been the drummer for King Diamond for years. He's like an excellent metal drummer. So, for example, but so what I saw in that program was there was some people who were very tailored for the straight ahead jazz thing. Like that was their passion. That was their blood. And they could really adapt to that. It came to me less naturally because that wasn't what I came about being influenced by. So I was sort of in that program side by side with people who sort of maybe were more, I don't want to say knowledgeable or passionate about actually playing authentic or contemporary cutting edge or straight ahead jazz. And that was kind of eye-opening to be alongside people who went about it differently, had different passions. If that makes sense.
Were you involved in a lot of ensembles there, and what kind of things were you a part of?
Oh, go ahead. Yeah, not as many as I'd like to be, just because it was such a gigantic program. In retrospect, sometimes I wish I had gone somewhere else where I could have been involved in ensembles from the beginning of my college. Because college is short. I mean, it can be long if you want to make it long and hang out for a while. But
Yeah, it was kind of long for me.
the way it was for my family and we pretty much allotted me 4 years and a little extra to get it done. So I didn't even get to play in a big band my freshman year, which was like a real drag when you think about it. Like you just came from this high level of performance in high school, and just be like, you spend months not even playing the kind of music that you're best at playing. That was unfortunate. But when I did finally compete, get my way further into the program, I played in a variety of the lab bands. There's 9 lab bands that rehearse at different hours of the clock. Some are actually simultaneous. Some actually don't rehearse at the time they say they're called. But like, I made it as far as what's called the 3 o'clock lab band, which I guess other contemporaries like Keith Carlock that was his high benchmark to reference. Some people maybe in the 3 o'clock, but yeah, I knew friends of mine were playing in the 2 o'clock and the 1 o'clock, the really high competitive band. And I had a semester in the school's only fusion group, only ensemble. It was a keyboard-based ensemble. Dan Hurley's ensemble with 4 different keyboards called the Zebras, named after the black and white of the keyboard. It goes back to the 70s, but it was still around when I was there. And so I played a semester, and that was more what I was tailored for. And I played in a guitar ensemble, which is kind of like a fusion group that had 5 guitars and a bass player, and I think it may have been keys. Very, very unique kind of group. There was a couple guitar ensembles at school.
If you're like a big fish in a small pond, and then when you go to college, you realize a lot of people are big fishes and everyone's on a certain level and you got to compete with others. It's eye-opening and it's humbling at the same time. And
right.
Eventually, there are certain people that will stand out, but it was an interesting experience for me going to a college and then realizing a lot of other people around me are just as good as me. So
certainly, and I knew what I was getting into going to a school like that. Like I think I specifically chose a route of going to a place where nobody was going to tell me I was amazing. Nobody's like, oh, you're so great, you're the best drummer in the school. Like some people can go to a place where it's a smaller place, and that can be their experience, and there's benefits for that too, because you get immediate opportunities. But I think I knew what I was getting into, where I was getting definitely small fish.
Now, I wasn't a drum set player at Howard University. I wasn't even a music major. I was
right. I remember you saying that. Yeah,
I was in the marching band, and I just remember, I think it was 87. Now, Gordon Campbell had come in 86, I think. Oh man, he's gonna probably kill me for
revealing his age.
No, 87, I think. I can't remember when he came. Damn, maybe he's 88. Yeah, I think it was 88. But
take away Gordon Campbell's not in his 30s.
But I just remember him coming in, and I just remember watching him play. We had tri-toms, and he was just an amazing player. And I knew he played in the Howard University Jazz Ensemble. But I remember when I was on my way out of college and out of the marching band, and one of my colleagues in the band was saying, man, there's a young drummer here that is just incredible. I mean, he's like killing it. He's just tearing everybody apart. I was like, who is it? He said, he looks like a little kid, man. His name is Chris Dave. You should just check him out.
Oh, wow.
And of course, we know how great he wound up being. But some people just come in are just way above everyone else. And everybody's like, oh, snap. So it's kind of cool to be in that environment, just like it is being on Broadway. I mean, there's drummers that are incredible, and we're all good at what we do. And I just believe that there are some drummers that are just more versatile and more better than me. And of course, I can only do certain things. But you are versatile. You can do so many different things. And that's why you've done so many different shows and been so successful. So after college, you were laser focused on Broadway. You came back to New York and did what? Well,
I took a quick detour, because I think that's what I finished school right at 22. I did it in 4 years and like a little bit of a summer semester. So like right before I turned 22, I was done with Texas, and I got my Bachelor of Music in jazz performance, jazz studies. So what do you do with that? It's like they say in Avenue Q, like, what do you do with the BA in music? It's in English. That was a brief chapter where I sort of didn't have an exact plan of how to go about. I figured it out quickly, but I went home to Central Jersey and I wasn't doing all that much that was getting me towards what I wanted to do. I was doing temp jobs, obviously just to pay bills, and playing in a hard rock cover band and doing a couple theater gigs, like a high school thing and all that. But I quickly realized that was a slow path that wasn't going to go in the direction I wanted. So I quickly changed courses and went for the cruise ship scene, which is probably what I should have done right out of college. So I guess I wasted 6-7 months not getting on that path. But cruise ships were the logical step for me because it was an opportunity that was open to fresh college graduates. It was, that scene was very welcoming of hiring people in their early 20s, and it was not only show drumming, it was a variety of everything. It was all kinds of, but of course, but all very reading based, very, very much based in chart reading and playing with click. So cruise ships was a very logical place for me to go to, and that's what I did at 22.
Royal Princess Caribbean cruises?
I worked for both Carnival and Norwegian Cruise Lines.
And you did shows, Broadway shows on those ships?
Yeah, I wouldn't call them Broadway shows. I mean, there was Broadway music, but the style of performance was so very different than what we do in our
In what way? I've never done it.
And it's funny. I actually knew what I was getting into because, again, I knew the differences because, if you can believe this, both my high school chorus and my high school band had both, we took an annual trip, like the band trip and the chorus trip, and I was in both programs. So lucky me, I got to spend the whole month of May on vacation, basically, when I was in high school. I took at least two trips. And both groups had taken a cruise on the same ship. So on Carnival's old ship called the Fantasy, I had taken as a passenger with the chorus and with the band, and I had seen the production show. So I knew what their production shows kind of looked and sounded like. And the one thing I noticed when I was 17, seeing the show, is I remember watching the drummer. The band was kind of off to the side of the stage, and what he was playing wasn't necessarily matching what I was hearing out of the sound system. And that's when I learned that there's pre-recorded parts on some of these shows. So it doesn't matter that you're playing. The band is almost like a live prop on stage. Like, you're playing, the microphones are on, depending on how much the sound man wants to put the live band up or not. But there's pre-recorded tracks. So it's like I guess they don't trust the people, a fail-safe system where I noticed that when I was 17, seeing this production show. I was like, okay, I heard that, but he's not playing that from what I was watching on the corner of the stage. So that's one part of it. A lot of the production shows, I mean, maybe it's different now. I haven't been on a ship for 17 years. So, but then there was a thing where you're playing along with a pre-recorded track. So it only makes sense to play exactly what's on the track for the production shows, for the dance shows. It's so weird. And there's much more instrumentation. You have the instrumentation that's on stage is basically like a glorified, almost like a smaller school jazz band, like a reduced part, smaller horn section, rhythm section, but you might hear like an orchestra on the track. So it's definitely like a fuller, sweeter track, but everything's on there. So you're just playing along with the pre-recorded track, but a click also. And a lot of the times the click and the track didn't line up with some really poorly created materials. It was better when it was when you were playing shows that weren't with a pre-recorded track. Like if you were playing for an entertainer, like they would call them fly-on entertainers, like a guest singer, or even like a guest juggler, or like a violinist who would play with tracks and use the band also.
How long did you do the cruise ship thing?
For the better part of 2 years. Took a couple breaks to come home for some family functions, but I over the course of 2 years, yeah.
Then you came back and we're back in New Jersey, and we're looking forward to opportunities in New York City. Yeah,
basically, I made the conscious decision of this ship would be my last ship. This was in the fall of 2004. I remember actually, I funny little story. Earlier that year, I had seen Michael Blanco, the bass player, a buddy of mine. I had seen him, and he said something to me like if you do any more cruise ships, I'm going to kick your ass. Or something. He was saying, I think he was trying to tell me that I think I had done enough, and it was time to come to the city and get off the ships, because I had gigged with him on the thing before, well, in between ship contracts. So yeah, so in the fall of 2004, I made the decision. Okay, this was the last ship, and I was going to just do what it takes to just stay put and get started on the New York scene from the winter of 2005 on.
So what was the first thing you did as far as breaking into Broadway? Thank you for listening to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast. Stay tuned for more.
If you like what you hear on the show, subscribe to the Broadway Drumming 101 newsletter at broadwaydrumming101.substack.com. That's Substack, substack.com. The Broadway Drumming 101 newsletter is your one-stop shop for everything you'll need to know about playing drums for Broadway musicals. When you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll learn about what it takes to be a successful pit musician, with content delivered directly to your email inbox 2 to 3 times a week. For $5 a month or $50 a year, you'll have a backstage pass to the world of a Broadway drummer playing on a hit show. As a paying subscriber, you'll receive behind-the-scenes access to the life of a musician who makes a living on Broadway. You'll also be able to read every post, not just those occasional free ones. You'll get access to all newsletter issues in the archives and have an ability to participate in subscriber-only comments and events. If you become a founding member for a gift of only $75, you'll receive discounted private drum lessons, an opportunity to watch Clayton play in the pit of his show, and a 25% discount on future promotional products. If you'd like to make a direct contribution to the production of this show, you can reach us at Venmo at Clayton-Craddock, Cash App at Syncopated, that's CINCOPATED, or PayPal at Clayton Craddock. Any amount of support will be appreciated. Thank you for listening.
So what was the first thing you did as far as breaking into Broadway?
I guess at that point in time, I was saying yes to all, like you do when you're brand new. I was saying yes to all the little gigs, all little cabarets and small things. I guess the first show that I did was an double off-Broadway. It was officially off-off-Broadway. It was downtown. It was a show called, I don't remember the name of the theater. I think it was the Transport Group. It was called The Audience. And I shared the gig with Greg Landis. So I guess it was a scheduling thing. So maybe he was originally going to do it. So Greg did half the dates and I did half the dates. And that was in the spring of 2005. So that was my first New York production.
So that was your show, or you were subbing for Greg?
It wasn't clear. It was I think both our names were in the program. It was a very rare split gig. Like it was both our gig depending on the day. there was a chunk of time Greg couldn't do it, so I started it and then Greg did the rest of the run. Very, very unusual, but it was cool. That's where I met Greg. Yeah.
And after that, then what was the next progression?
After that, I was very fortunate to actually get in line with my first Broadway subbing opportunity. That was that came up very quick. I have my very close friend Sean McDaniel, who a lot of people recognize from all things Broadway. He's a very, very important and very successful in this scene. And Sean's a college friend of mine. He's 4 years older than me, but I crossed paths in North Texas actually, and that was a very, very, very fortunate connection to make, where we both realized we're people who are enthused about show drumming, which was a rarity down at that school. So we became fast friends, bonding over that specifically. And then Sean came to New York before I did. I was living in New Jersey, but he left Texas and went to New York and stayed there. So he was recommending me for things as soon as he could, which I am forever grateful and indebted to him for. And one of the things that came up was that there was the Broadway production of Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. And a lot of the musicians weren't the typical musicians that were doing a lot. There was a contractor was the late Sam Litvia, and the drummer at the man on the drum book was Ed Fast. And at the time I heard he was looking for a new sub or two, I guess, or Sean had heard. So Sean put he recommended me to him, or told me to make contact on his recommendation. So I got in touch with Ed Fast on that recommendation, and very thankful to Ed. He decided to give me, when I was 24, my first Broadway subbing opportunity.
So what was it like preparing for that?
It was huge for me. It was like, I would say, I use the term laser focused, but it was like my life revolved around that preparation for that month or two. That was all I cared about. I was living in an apartment in Weehawken at the time, so I still had all my drums and gear back at my parents' house, an hour away. So I would just drive out to their house and practice at their house. So I made the setup as best I could with whatever gear I had at the time. And it was just constant practice. And I was lucky. They made it was early times for this, but they made a conductor video. So I was able to study a conductor video, which I think I copied off the DVD. It was and I think I watched it probably 8 times, which is more than I watch shows now. I'm going to sub, but when you're brand new, like, why, if you have the free time, why not? And if they're open to having you, obviously they want you to absorb as much as you need. So I think I watched 8 times to really know exactly how it went, what to expect from the conductor and parts.
And I'm sure it went well.
Yes, it sure. I mean, it was intensely scary, but
as it always is.
Yeah, that show itself, fortunately, is maybe not the most rigorous of shows in terms of the material. But I felt very fortunate that I had a positive start to this whole crazy thing, because it's not always as smooth as that. There's a lot of ups and downs, more difficult people and difficult experiences. But that one was distinctly a positive experience. Everyone in the orchestra, I mean, I was the youngest person there, but everyone in the orchestra was so kind to me. And the conductor was Kristen Blodgett, and she actually,
she's great.
She designated me on my first show.
Really? Wow.
So like, I don't think I think at 24, almost 25, that I don't think I even captured the weight of like what that, like, yeah, you're already designated. So that was,
before you go on, share with people what designation and approved means on Broadway.
Oh yeah, I'd be happy to expand on that. And this, I've actually found that this is, the terms of this are different depending on the show. Some shows have looser terms and of what they consider approved, and some shows have very methodical, by the book, like numeric systems of. So before, let's talk about approval first. Approved is something that is usually determined about a sub based on 1 at the most 2 performances, I would say, where based on your performance, your first performance as a sub, especially if the music director happened to be in that day, if they didn't put you in with the associate conducting her that day, based on that performance, are you approved to come back? And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're in for the run of the show. Things could go south after that, but are you approved? Will they let you back in the door for a second chance? And so that's like a level to yes, you're approved to come back. Or maybe a conductor wants to decide on, they might decide on somebody after 2 or 3 shows. It depends on the conductor. So that's my understanding of what being approved counts as. Now, being designated, that is a status that is earned by a sub on a show. In some shows, it's expected to be earned. Otherwise, it's not going to work out. Designated is where the MD and maybe the associate and maybe even the in-house contractor, whoever the powers that be are within that pit, decide that sub's performance is solid enough to be considered on par as the regular. So there's no issue with them being placed into any performance, meaning them being there is as solid as the regular being there, and that that sub could be in to play when a first-time sub comes in on a different instrument within their section. That's generally my technical understanding of it. So, and a lot of shows won't designate somebody until at least 5 appearances. And then it might take you longer than that to even earn that designation, but you're usually informed by the in-house or the MD, like, okay, you're designated now. And it doesn't always happen. And I've also played on shows where it's a lot more loose than that. And I've never even heard that word thrown around. So it really depends on the show. But I think designation for where on shows where that is a thing, where that does matter, is essentially saying that your performance adequately represents the regular. So if you're there, it's a non-issue.
So you were designated after your first time subbing on a Broadway show.
Yes, that's heavy, and it's certainly something I never expected. Like I understood, like, okay, I prepared for it, like my life depended on it. So I guess that's going to happen. That's what would lead up to it. But yeah, that was a very positive start to the subbing experience in that way.
Did that lead to any other subbing opportunities?
That particular show, I don't think it did in terms of directly rooted from that show. Any other subbing opportunities that I got subsequently came as a result of different connections. But what that show did lead to was that contractor, the late Sam Lipfia. He was mostly a tour contractor. Broadway was a rare foray for him. So it was. I don't know what business terms. Why it came to be that he was the New York contractor for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, but he was mostly a tour guy. And one of his tours, it was the Troika tour of Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat, starring Patrick Cassidy, was out already, and the drummer was leaving the gig for another gig. So a replacement was needed for that tour. And based on hearing about me from doing well subbing on Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, Sam invited me to take over that tour, which coincided with actually Chitty Chitty Bang Bang closed New Year's Eve, 05-06, and then that tour needed a replacement in January of 06.
Oh wow! So you went right on tour.
Correct.
Oh, that's
after
good.
Subbing, yeah.
How long was that?
The tour, I did half that tour. It had been in progress since the year prior. So I was on that chair until it closed at the end of July. So I guess 7 months of that show.
And so you got a little taste of making steady money.
Absolutely. Yes.
It's a great feeling. I had that feeling when I went out on the bus and truck tour of Footloose in the year 2000. I was like, wait a minute, I don't have to drag my drums around and I get a big $750 a week. I'm rich.
Yeah. and I was very fortunate, even though this was Troika, this was an equity tour. So it wasn't the bus and truck model. I was actually staying in the city in a hotel for a week and sometimes 2 weeks, and traveling on Mondays. It was that model. So I was very lucky to get that opportunity early, just at the age of 25. So wow.
So you came back. You start looking around for opportunities to sub again.
Yes, I probably would, had I not been engaged already still married to my my wonderful wife. Had I not already been engaged, had I been single, looking back, I probably would have toured more throughout my 20s. But it came to, I was settling into more of a commuter domestic situation earlier on than maybe some do it. But yeah, as a result of that, I was back in the New York area by the summer of 06. And yes, I was looking for, I was like, the thing to do. Okay, I did that tour, and now I'm going to pursue more subbing opportunities. As my main thing.
You became domesticated.
yeah, I sure did. Yeah, that was.
It's a wonderful thing, people. I'm not gonna lie. Being married is a wonderful thing, from what I hear.
Right. Yeah, no, I know that is a can of worms that you have.
I'm just joking. No, I'm seriously. Being married is a good thing. I'm all for marriage and family. I love my kids, just like I'm sure you do too. You have 2 kids, correct?
2 kids, correct.
Great. Let's not talk about family here. Let's talk about drums.
Right. Yeah.
So
forget them.
So start looking for opportunities, and then what was the next thing that came your way?
That summer, I was another cold call situation where it was recommended. I believe this recommendation actually came from A great percussionist who plays in all around New Jersey, Philadelphia, and New York, a man named Ed Shea. I had met Ed Shea in March of that year on the Joseph tour. He was the local percussionist in Philadelphia. And he was the percussionist on a show. It was Martin Short's show. It was called Martin Short, Fame Becomes Me. It was Martin Short. It wasn't a one-man show. It was Martin Short and a small ensemble of actors. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen and on Broadway. And it was a situation where at the right time, I got in touch with Rich Mercurio. I cold called him, or based on the recommendation. And Rich was receptive to having me in. I think he liked the fact that I was very available. I didn't have much else going on, so I was available to cover pretty much any date he threw at me. So that started that connection, and I can't say enough good things about Rich Mercurio. If you want to talk about one of the best players to ever do it, so somebody who makes any music he touches, he is the feel man. He will make it feel as great as it can possibly feel. If you want that feel, call Rich Mercurio. That's all I can. That's what I can say about him. And what a kind, warm person. That's so important. So Rich was kind enough to bring me into that situation. So my next show to sub was Martin Short, Fame Becomes Me.
I haven't heard. I don't know much about that. How is it's a one man show and.
Well, it's a small ensemble.
Okay.
Yeah, it was mostly sketches. It was a musical, but it was like musical sketches, and it was just so funny. Really.
Did you follow Rich to sub at Little Shop of Horrors? Was that around that?
That was prior to that. That was when he did Little Shop. I was still working on cruise ships. I did see that show, but I hadn't met him. That was prior. Yeah,
I think that's where I don't know where I met him, but I was going to bring up something that you were going to talk about before, as far as being approved and designated and doing a show. And I was going to ask you about people when a conductor gives you notes after the show.
Sure. I have a lot of experience with that.
Well, yes, I bring that up because I subbed for Rich Mercurio at Little Shop of Horrors back in the early 2000s. And Henry Aronson was the musical director. And I just remember, I think that might have been the second show I subbed after Rent, but I just remember getting notes and, not being sad that I got them. When I get notes, I want to know what I need to improve on. So when you get a note, Shannon Ford said, what you should say when you get a note? Say, thank you. And nothing else. Just this is what, they're there to help you get better. So Henry Aronson, I used to be nervous when he'd pick up his pad like during the show and write stuff.
Oh, that's the worst. That is the worst. When they're writing about you.
Yeah, so
I've been in pits where I'm like grumbling to myself, depending on who, like put your pen down, like just.
So he pick up his. He did this one time to me. I said this on another podcast, but I told him, it's like every time you pick up your pad, I think you're like writing about me. So. During a quiet part of the show,
this hits home.
He's like, "Hey, Clayton."
So he starts teasing you about it.
Yeah, he was just messing with me. I was like, "Damn, man, okay, now you're just playing with me." But you do think about, oh my God, I made a mistake. He's going to write about it, so he picks up, he or she picks up their pad. But fortunately, the more you do the show, the fewer times they pick up their pad, the better you're going to be. Then you can you don't necessarily want to relax totally because you're still there doing a job, but then you can talk to the guys and the women in the band. And
yeah.
So tell me about your note taking or your note experience.
Oh,
overall.
This is all over the place because this depends. And I've done a lot of subbing at this point. So I've had a variety of experiences with note giving. And what I've learned is it really is about the conductor and his or her personality and approach, hands-on or less so hands-on approach to a show. Some people are very meticulous, and you could be somebody who has subbed at a show for years. I've been where it's almost not about you. It's almost like the way this conductor works is they're going to give notes no matter what. So even if you play something on a show for 4 or 5 years, you're still going to get notes. There's a couple people that are like that, and they have every right to be. It's their job. It's just, that's one approach. And then there's some who are definitely a little more relaxed, or I don't know if entrusting is the word, where like once you've settled into your place there and you do what you do, it's not necessary for them to tweak your experience. And I find it's very different from show to show, from person to person. I've had, one experience I'll share, and this isn't a negative thing. It's just the way it was. When I was first subbing at the Lion King, Carl German, the MD there, he's the kind of MD that will give you a lot of notes, constructive notes, for a while. Like, not just your first show, for your first, at least for me. I don't know about the other subs at the time, but you'll get multiple note sessions, and not just like coming by the pit with hey, a couple of things, like meet me in my office, and which is a little off-putting, because you might think like, oh shoot, like this is it.
Going to the principal's office.
No, but it's weird for him. That's just his thorough way of doing it. It was like a note session where he's not annoyed at you. It's not like, oh, it's just more like, oh, this and this and this, and it's just, so that's an example of someone who's very thorough. And for many of your first times in there, you'll get a lot of information. So that's an example of somebody who was very, what would be the word, effusive with
meticulous.
Yeah.
I find it amazing that some conductors, like when I was subbing at Cats the last go around under Bill Lanham, the conductor would, after either the first act or after the show, would say, yeah, and Mr. Mistopheles, in the second half of measure 32, you played mezzo piano instead of piano. Could you please play? I'm like, oh my God, how can you hear that?
Yeah, no. Yeah, there's some people who are microscopic.
Yes. Yeah, play 1/3 off of the ride. So make sure, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. We adapt it, because as we know, there are some people who are like that, and some people who are the complete opposite of that. Like, neither's like wrong or right. It's just like, it's a personality thing. Yeah, some people will microscope you. Yeah, exactly. Like the third beat of bar 32, more mezzo piano, exactly. And some people will be like, yeah, man, feels great. See you next time. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And sometimes those people, you kind of know you made a mistake. They'd look at you in the monitor, be like, then you made a mistake and you know what it was.
That's the most professional thing for an MD, when it doesn't need to come up in the note session. You're fully aware that mishap happened. You don't have to have a conversation about it. Like, especially if it's a show you've subbed 100 times.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Like, okay, we had that moment. We had that moment. Okay. Right. I missed that. God, my bad. But like, so that does not need to come up in a note session, I feel, when it's mutually acknowledged, especially with a glance. Like, I know.
So after subbing for Rich, you went for looking for more opportunities.
Yeah, that was a slow climb. I don't think I couldn't say that things snowballed from there. It was, because we realistically, it wasn't that established yet. Like, it wasn't like, oh, yeah, call him. It was kind of a slow grind for a year or two to make more and more subbing opportunities happen as I slowly added onto the short list of shows that I was able to sub.
So this is kind of important. When looking for opportunities, because I'm sure you've had people reach out to you when you've had your own show.
Yes.
And there are people that ask you to come in to watch, or ask you for opportunities for them to sub for you. What are some things that people should do, and what are some things that people shouldn't do when contacting someone who has a chair on Broadway?
Yeah, I have opinions on this, and I try to keep very a positive outlook on this, because I realize not everybody knows. And so I don't want to say things that would like make anyone feel bad or self-conscious about like how they may have accidentally approached someone or approached someone when they knew less about how to do things. But
wait, there's more. Stay tuned for part 2 of my conversation with Joe Choroszewski. Thank you for listening to the Broadway Drumming 101 podcast. Head over to the Broadway Drumming 101 YouTube page where you'll find unedited conversations that I've had with some of your favorite musicians. On the YouTube page, you're going to find bonus content that I don't feature on my Instagram page or here on the podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and click on that little bell at the top so that you'll be notified when a new video is uploaded. Thank you for listening and stay tuned for more.